All right, so Jason and I made a little video to introduce kind of the concept of what this is, and this is art in place, in which we go into studios. Well, I'm really saying the exact same thing I said in the video.
Yeah.
So without further introduction, we'll play an introduction. Hello, and welcome to Art in Place. My name is Dustin Cockerham, and I am the Art and Experience Developer for the High Desert Museum. And today, I have brought our entire wardrobe, makeup, audio-video department here to my home garage, where we will talk about artists as space makers and people who create a sense of place through their work. So what does an artist's space look like? And what happens when that artist has to work in multiple mediums or multiple disciplines in one space? And to answer that, we go to the venerable, the talented, the statuesque MOsley WOtta.
Oh, hi, Dustin. So one of the things we want to talk about is space and the multiple disciplines you might have within that space. So my art consists of writing, painting, and music. It is convenient for me to have stuff in my own home so that I can get at it right away. And that's also just born out of necessity too. It's a lot cheaper to have all this stuff in my own spot. So this is going to be a virtual tour of sorts. I'd say this studio space is pretty real, as I didn't really clean it up or fix it up or fancy it up too much. So you just kind of get to see candidly what it is. In real time, my children may run in and interrupt this video, which oftentimes happens. So let's back it up to the door. This right here is a garage. There's the door for proof. I have books aplenty all the way around. Ping, 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 ping. As well as like workup that my kids have done or I have done, or things that inspire me and things that I've accumulated over the years. We all have like these various little shrine spaces that make our space feel like our space. Over here, we've got, you know, this is a big old thing full of markers and tools and, again, supplies and materials accumulated over a lifetime of absorption and not saying no when folks were saying, hey, we were throwing this stuff away. This window is deliberately put to the back of the desk so that I can have that natural light coming in, but that I'm not like compelled to look up and out. The internet that it's hooked up to is a window onto a world that's distraction enough. Underneath this, I have a little prayer that I like to say that I got out of Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art book. So I like to recite that. I like to incorporate superstitious practices into my artwork because I think it's helpful and it's a way for me to engage with the spirit realm. I've got my incense stick over here and I've got my cleansing sage. I don't know if other folks believe in that stuff, but it works for me. So that's what I do. The main thing that I want to get across is that I am able to, within my own home, go from working on an album to going to work on some painting to going to doing. Did sound cut off for you too?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get that mug off the screen and do it real. Oh, the chair's kind of an important part though, because I'm sitting in it right now. That's a nice chair that we just found. This whole space is drenched in free stuff that just like, I just was at the dump yesterday and kept you got the cat at the dump? Oh, sorry, I got confused. I totally was looking at the video. I don't know what just happened. I just had an out-of-body experience. But I just went to the dump yesterday, and I was like oddly looking at the truck next to me because they were throwing out what looked to be like perfectly good, and I didn't have the courage to be like, can I have that? Or like, why are you throwing it out? Did somebody die in that? You know, like, why are you getting rid of it? But there's so much good stuff in this town. We seem to chuck stuff out all the time, and reclaiming that is very useful. So that's why the chair was important.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the audio cut out for us. Did it cut out from everyone else? Give a nod.
Great.
All right. Okay. So everyone can hear us now. So we fixed our audio problem. We are constantly adapting. And that's kind of where this all came from, is thinking about space, and everyone's kind of been confronted with their own space pretty abruptly. And artists have always been space makers and have always seen space in a way to to make something positive out of it and create with it. And so that's kind of been the catalyst for these conversations.
Yeah. I mean, it reminded me of, I'm sure everybody has been affected, because how could you not be? And I think folks who are artists might be a little bit more equipped to deal with the flux that is the constant of being an artist. You're just constantly in flux in a way that you think you have to acknowledge more readily, more openly, more as a daily practice, whereas there's other jobs maybe you don't have to acknowledge. Anything could go at any time. And it reminded me of when the recession hit. And I knew a lot of artists who were poor before the recession, they were poor during the recession, they were poor after the recession. So like, it didn't necessarily change the fact that they had to be scrappy and they had to make ends meet. And I think that's similar to right now, where a lot of folks are like being pushed into uncomfortable spaces. And this is like, I was talking to another artist who like literally works in a powder room and like literally is working in a kitchen sink. I mean, in a bathroom sink. So that's already uncomfortable. You're already pressed in on your space. But if you're used to that and you have that, you're not as negatively impacted by these kind of massive upsets where we have to talk through Zoom. So.
Yeah, and I saw, like you had mentioned, already in a space that's uncomfortable. So Ben Bulletin, you recently talked to the Ben Bulletin, and you had mentioned that right now it's a time to be uncomfortable and to not be okay, to actually look at that and then experience that and be able to turn that into something and move forward, in a positive way. And I think that's a lot of what happens in artist space and in studios, not only the physical space, but the idea you're really processing through maybe things that are uncomfortable and creating something, much more uplifting afterwards.
Yeah, could be. Sometimes the upshot is that you create something uplifting, but I've known artists, I mean, to your point, like I know folks who deliberately put themselves in a spot that, is like poorly heated, for example. They want it to be cold. So they're kind of up against that discomfort and that edge. And I think that can throw you, I think we romanticize as artists suffering, but I think there is a component of discomfort that is absolutely necessary if you want to get anywhere, between, confronting your own skill set and having to move past that, or hearing somebody else's critique or whatever. But I get the not actively seeking out suffering, but adjusting constantly to growth, which is always going to be uncomfortable. Like, that's just kind of how it goes.
Sure. Do we have any questions coming through yet? Does anybody have any specific questions about being in the space or creating or just, time and place at this moment? And if so, put them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll bring you in. It's an interesting time, and there's been a lot of art born out of uncomfortable things. There's and then it's trying to relay that experience through art. It documents the highs and lows through human culture. And so it's interesting to see what's going to come out of this time and this place.
Right. Yeah. Like, I would be surprised if there wasn't like a deluge. Like, I think that for two reasons. I think folks who were making art before were going to continue. That's because that's one place that we go to make sense of what doesn't make sense. And if we're really confused right now for a lot of reasons, we're going to go and make more art because that's one of our mechanisms for understanding. But then I think there's also going to be a ton of folks who are confronting their mortality in a way that makes them think about what their priorities are. And a lot of times some of the things that rise to the surface are what I really wanted to do was. And one of the categories that gets put to the side when it's what I really want to do is like the arts, because there's so many voices along the way that are like, that's irresponsible, that's not practical, don't do that. But if tomorrow, if yesterday is gone and we got right now, and you have no idea about tomorrow, you just don't know that that's ever going to come for you, and you really wanted to pick the viola up, if you really wanted to get into painting, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see a lot of new folks and faces on the scene in terms of the arts. And I think that term even in itself is limited, because we're probably going to see new styles from this sort of forced situation pop up, and folks that maybe wouldn't have worked with each other who are now working with each other. You know, it's like, I feel like with this that's going on, like that's a good way to make use of this. I feel like some folks are really wasting this pandemic. Like we're wasting which is hard to, you know, like if somebody could look at me painting and be like, you've been wasting not just this pandemic, but the last 2 decades of your life, you know, but it speaks to something. When you create something that goes from an idea to something tangible, an idea to something that you can share, it does something inside of you that is really healthy. It's like one of the healthiest things I think you can do, but I'm biased, obviously. Oh, here's some questions.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. That's such a real question. So it says, how does a parent or a loved one support the artist in the house best? You leave that wild animal alone. I mean, I wouldn't want to live in a house with other artists, personally. I mean, I think that's some kind of communication, right? You got to ask what it is that they need, because sometimes the biggest thing is they just need space, like, and maybe not actual physical space. They just need space to think their thoughts. And you might get glared at when you ask out of the kindness of your heart, what would you like for dinner? Somebody might shoot daggers at you because they're working on their novel and they're just all thinking about that. And then you say, hey, I was thinking maybe we just don't do chicken tonight. Are you okay with just doing a salad? And they just look at you all mean. And now you're in this weird conflict space. So what kind of support, let me ask the question to the question. What kind of support did you have in mind when you wrote the question? You could say, you could type, I guess either is fine. Yes, Jill, yes.
We've got a visual hand raise.
Thanks. I was like, I can't type that fast. I have a kiddo who is an amazing artist. He is prolific, and I laughed when you said, you know, just give him a space, because that's totally like, he gives me a lot of weird looks. Like, I am not able to communicate with you right now because I am in my space.
Right.
I guess I thought of, like, when you talk about creating spaces, like, he has a room, but like, do I, because it's hard to go out right now. So do I offer to fuel that space with new stuff? Do I just wait for him to ask? Do I, you know, I guess I look at him and like, I want him to use this time because it is prolific. And at the same time, I don't want to be the person who's like, so what did you do today? Can I see what it is? And I'm looking for like how to find that balance between, I'm dying to see what he's doing, but let him create. And I thought, from an artist's mind, what did you see in how your family functions around you when you're creating? So
yeah, I just think you're in an impossible spot, because I mean, that's just real. Because like, all my kids are very artistic. My wife is very artistic, and they all are doing those. It's hard because you want, if you're making something, you want other people to see it, but not too soon. Don't look at it yet, you know. And then also, if you're mom, that can be difficult, or if you're somebody close, because if they're used to you being kind and loving and supportive, and you come in and say that this is so amazing, they might question not they might question not your authenticity of like love and support. They may question if you have the wherewithal to look at their work critically, to give them feedback that they can use to then improve their art. That's so amazing might make it look like it's not amazing because that's the wrong kind of green. So you know, like, it's really difficult, I think, to be in that position of being supportive. But it seems to be like if you can get out of their way and then kind of wait for folks to say, hey, like, look what I did. And as a parent, it's so hard to not rush that, to not say, can I see what you're working on? Or somebody that you love. And it's also hard to not just want to like flood them with support. But I think that's kind of what it is like you can overwhelm them with, that is so amazing. And the other thing I heard an art teacher tell me in a conversation, it's dangerous to say this is the best one you've done, because now so are you not supposed to? But when you say this is the best one that you've done, now you've created some kind of ceiling that they have to either exceed that or everything fails to meet that. And then you're muddling it with psychiatric bills because are they seeking your approval now? And so, but space seems just like let them do their thing, you know?
Cool. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah. There's more questions I'm looking at. Oh, one question. Is there anything I'm working on that I'm particularly excited about? Yeah, I don't know if there's anything different. So it's always things around performance. It's always things around visual arts. It's always things around writing and finding the roads between those things. What I'm liking about getting older and what I'm liking about what I was talking about with priorities, I don't think I'm caring less, but I'm more willing to say it exactly the way I want to say it, as a form of respect to the audience or to whoever might hear it. Whereas before, I would censor a lot of what I was saying as a form of respect to whoever is listening to it. So I really like the getting older part, because there's something about that lets you recognize how limited your time is and how little you want to BS other people, and how honesty might start becoming a priority and those kind of things. So I think for an artist, that's really important, because we've all heard schlocky songs that we just don't really, it was a good marketing scheme, but it wasn't amazing art, you know? And so that's what I'm liking more than, I just want shirts that just say get old. I just think that's the thing. There's so much emphasis put on who's the young, who's the up and coming. And that's easier for me to say because I'm moving away from that, but I really think there's something to that. So that's that. One of the themes that I've noticed is the strange passage of time during this pandemic. How do you think artists will interpret that visually? Yeah, good question. I'm very curious because we're all holding. We're like all in, you know, I'm not the person who came up with this, and I don't think the person who came up with this was the person who came up with this, but we've gone from consume caterpillar phase. Now we're all cocooned or chrysalis. And so now respectively, we're either going to moth or we're going to butterfly out of this. And I think a lot of folks are like, not even intentionally, but because of the occasion, are hoarding the work that they're doing. They you have to say, I mean, maybe you can share it on Instagram, like maybe you can put it out on whatever, but I think we will see. And then, yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And again, I think it's going to be interesting because there's going to be folks who haven't been inundated with artistic circles and all the blah that can come with that, who are kind of, you know, like pure artists who are going to be making stuff. So that's, that'll be interesting. It'll also be interesting to see like how literal and how abstract, those are some of the things I have been observing. The interpretation is around like the coronavirus. So I've seen like I saw a great illustration of like a nurse flipping off this giant, massive coronavirus. And so it was like this small human being giving the birth to this giant coronavirus. That was a very literal explanation. I could really clearly understand it. But I'm sure there's going to be some other things that are much more, that take a lot more time to interpret, to understand the depth of what they're trying to convey. How has any mourning or sense of loss during this time influenced your current work process? I think that kind of goes back to some of the things I'm excited about. But personally, and I'm certainly not alone in this, it is coming out quite clearly in the work. And the things that I'm writing about quite clearly are dealing with things like death. I'm thinking about that a lot right now. I'm thinking about how much I love the people around me and how, regardless of what's going on right now, they will go away at some point. And my hope is that I'll be able to understand some kind of method to rejoin them, even though that we're going to leave this corporal form. So that's coming up. And I think art becomes the process to mourn, I think too. That's a real way to understand some of that stuff. I'm just like going, which I, you know, feel free to tell me. Dustin, we should have given you some shut up cards to start with. You just hold up like,
No.
Just
you did touch on something earlier that I thought was really interesting, talking about like interesting collaborations that could come out of this. And I think, and not just in like a silly like romantic comedy Hollywood thing, like, oh, I was quarantined with so and so, we put our forces together and made this. But like, I think as people to explore new medium and kind of new ways to create, and are stuck in new spaces that kind of make other things happen, like there will be new and interesting collaborations happening, artists and emerging of even different mediums. And since you work in multiple medium, like has there been ways you've been thinking about of like a new way to combine like spoken word, visual art, lyric, however, is there a new way to kind of merge those together that you're excited about and playing with?
Well, before I even answer that, I mean, to your point, like this is happening. This is a collaboration between artists that wouldn't have happened without this particular scenario, you know, like just doing the Zoom combo. But yeah, not new in terms of like new tools. I haven't discovered anything beyond like the goop of paint or like digital pixels and painting that way or whatever. But I have time to like, I'm hand animating right now, a song that we did. So that's something that like is easier to do right now because I get less flack for sitting for hours, you know, like drawing on an iPad, because they're like, what else was I going to do with my day? I mean, there's obviously other things, but so that's something that I've just noticed, you know, like this is just affording me that. And it's not that I would have had to carve that time out a lot harder, you know, before, but that's like one thing that immediately comes to mind. What are you working on right now? Yeah.
Myself? Or
yeah.
Oh, well.
Sorry. When you have a screen.
The High Desert Museum.
Hey, Dustin. What are you working on?
Well, we're currently getting ready to really dive deep into a new exhibit at High Desert Museum.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a lot of fun, talking about daredevils and maybe talking about a time that people, or a time or a type of people that stood in the face of fear and didn't, you know, kind of were ambivalent to odds being stacked against them. So I think it's going to be a really, really fun show to reopen to and to invite people in.
That's kind of perfect. That's kind of perfect. And it's also perfect right now because like there's so many different versions of Daredevil and not necessarily ones that are like the champion song. Like sometimes when you see somebody without a mask, depending, you're like, ooh, that's risky, right? Like it's an interesting thing to interpret right now. We were talking about heroes before you loaded on, and that's another one that's interesting. We've expanded some interpretations around. Can I go to another question?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, bam. I like this question. Yeah, I do. Hey, I like your art. I like that you like my art. If you don't like my art, tell somebody you don't like all about it. Do you have any pieces for sale? Hell yeah. Absolutely. You let me know. Let me know. How to get in contact with me. I'll just say my phone number. Let's see what happens. 541. I'll put it in the chat. I don't care. Let's see what happens. Oh, looks sketchy. Dink. There it is. That's my phone number. Send me a text. Yeah, I mean, I think always selling the art, but that can be tricky too sometimes, honestly. You have to let go? Do they understand it enough? That's where poverty really helps. When you're like, it's not a question, we need the money, then that's very helpful. When you start making it as an artist, I don't know, how can you sell anything then? No, I don't think that's true. Okay, thinking about sense of place and the role art plays in that. Do you think Central Oregon has any kind of unique take on this situation? Yeah, I hope so. I think it's just, I've spent so much time here, so it's so difficult for me to have a perspective that isn't including Central Oregon. But I think I have felt this way for a long time, that we don't always know how to step up to the kind of ownership that is required to embrace how unique we are here in Central Oregon. I think we're always learning how to do that. But just like, I don't know, I just always bounce around on this idea. I mean, we're in the desert. Like, we exist in the desert. We're always sort of bordered by and confronted by a drought. We're confronted by, and then when there isn't a drought, we're confronted by the white water could take you out. You got volcanoes around you everywhere. We're like constantly in peril, and it's beautiful here. I would like to see more of a blend of those kind of things, where we talk about what is dangerous, what could be hazardous, and blend that with the beautiful stuff. I see a lot of beautiful stuff come out of this beautiful place. I get that part of it, but the beautiful stuff comes from the risk and the ugly stuff, and some of the things that we oftentimes want to not look at. You know, a friend of mine passed away recently from, not related to this pandemic. The way that she was adorned was beautiful. There's no other word for it. I heard somebody recently define beauty as basically something that is pleasing, that isn't asking anything of you. Some paraphrase there. I would like to see that woven in more. And the more we can be honest with how we got to be in Central Oregon and all the things that are taboo about living here, even if it's just like, what's taboo about having a lawn in a desert, right? Like, it would be nice to see that kind of stuff get incorporated in more.
Yeah, that's a really great quote. And I wish I could actually remember a quote that I just saw similar to that, you're talking about, we are in this beautiful place, and a lot of times work doesn't come from a beautiful place. And here we are, and I saw a definition, there's something like how to define art, and it was like, do we define art, is that it's, oh, I wish I could remember it perfectly, and now I'm using all my devices, so I don't have that Google intelligence that we all have.
Right.
But it was creating something perfect and not asking for any explanation, just like nature.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's, I think being in a beautiful place, like, we see that around us at all times, and then maybe it's difficult for people to create in the way that, as it usually comes from a non-beautiful place. A lot of times it can be very, as the catalyst to start that process.
How difficult it is, like, when you think about the trials and tribulations a tree has to go through just to exist, like, and it's out in the elements all the time. I mean, you had a great one the other day, which I have absolutely stolen from you, which is like, why do we even make art? Like, what's the point of it? Because this is a question that comes up when everything comes falling down. So we all had a day where, like, everything came falling down, and Chicken Little was right, and everything was just messed up. We had at least one of those days within all of this. And then you go to your priorities, and you do your food, clothing, shelter. And then you ask, well, where's art? Where's the role of art when I need to, like, focus on clean running water, and I need to focus on food, and I need to focus on, like, can you build a house? Do you know how to hunt? Do you know how to, take care of yourself? Where does art fit in with all of that? And then you said this great thing that, to paraphrase you, but it was like, it chronicles our existence. Like, when you say it like that, the function of it, and not only chronicles our existence in terms of like, let me just write these facts down in a book, you can create something that transcends languages and the bias that come and the lenses and limitations that come with a language through art. I mean, and you get that same thing in nature. You don't need to know how to speak English to understand some of the rich and deep truth that is like something growing from underneath a rock. Like you don't need to, you can just know that. But just, I'm saying it because I feel weird but I stole it. I think I even put it into an application.
No, you can.
Okay.
You can steal anything. That's probably the best one I got. Let's see if we have any more in here. No, but I do like exploring the idea of like, especially at a time like this where like everything kind of goes into your real nuts and bolts, like what I really need.
Yeah.
And then, and people are been hunkered down in this, and now we're finding these time to have conversations about art and stuff. And so people are stepping back and being like, all right, well, what am I really missing? Like, what is it that I really miss about how, like what my day-to-day was, and like starting to appreciate those things that maybe you don't focus on too much in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think so. I absolutely think so. But I also don't think that those things that we are missing necessarily will hold up the same way when we return to them. Like driving around, like, and seeing folks lined up at the Chick-fil-A or at McDonald's. I don't know if that thing is ever like, I don't know if that's really satisfying the memory that you had. Maybe it's coming close, but like what you're actually looking for is probably in-house. Like it's probably the ability to have the freedom to like go out on an impulse, but it doesn't actually have to land there. Or I miss that social interaction, but it doesn't actually have to land there. So we're like rerouting like communally our neural pathways. And then we're also like communally not even trying to. We're like, I'm just gonna go over here. But we're not necessarily questioning until it gets like really dire. And then we really start to question, like, do I need to have this? Do I need to have it? Which has also been fascinating, like some of what we are prioritizing again, like what got to stay open and what didn't get to stay open. And I think if you have some sort of place where you can create art, that world becomes limitless and infinite. And then you're less concerned with what do I have access to or not have access to, because all of a sudden you feel like you can create any of it. And like now nothing is missing for a brief time, you know, what you're creating. That there's that feeling.
That one thing that I've been kind of hearing come up from people is as everyone's been, you know, a lot of people have been furloughed or their jobs have been affected or they're working from home or maybe not working right now. And people taking that time to be in their space, and maybe they are starting to create. And I've heard multiple people just be like, I don't know if I want to go back to work, or maybe I don't want to keep doing the profession I was doing. And so I pose that question to everyone out there. Is there anyone that is just going to throw in the towel on working after this?
especially any of your coworkers.
I see some big grins.
If you have any of your coworkers on the screen, definitely say something. Be like, I'm out.
Yeah. But a lot of people are going back in and finding maybe they do want to be artists, or maybe they're writing, or whatever they're doing. They're starting to be like, yeah, actually, this feels like a better way to spend my day, or they're becoming comfortable in a space and starting to really express themselves. And I think that's really powerful. And so I don't know if you've had some of those same experiences.
I would love to hear from folks. On that question, or maybe artistic practices or the relationship to space right now. But that's a very personal question. That's a very useful, and there's a very useful answer if you're willing to risk that answer. That's a very useful answer if anybody's got an answer to Dustin's question. Oh, yeah. See? Friendly neighborhood creeper. We all see. refuse to believe the talent pool is restricted to the names that I'm used to seeing. I refuse to believe that.
All right, so I'll put in the chat.
Great.
Okay.
I think your mic is on, Penelope. We can hear you.
Oh, did you just turn it on?
Yeah.
Okay. How
Our
are you
Wizard of Oz man behind the curtain.
Okay. How are you staying connected with your community of artists, your tribe, your people?
Right. I think we have, well, I'm not. In one way, I'm not. In one way, it's completely been severed. Like, you know, like I can't go to my friend's house who like makes music and say, while I'm standing behind him, move this piece over to this piece. We have to figure out a different way to communicate. On the one hand, that's completely different now. On the other hand, we've been using these channels through phone, internet, what have you, for such a long time, and we figured out how to communicate through my way of describing things, which isn't, you know, based in academia, with folks who do have some kind of schooling, and figuring out how to, you know, one person speaking in Latin and the other person speaking in just metaphor, you know, like how are you going to navigate that? We've been using this, and there's been an increase in, for example, the amount of music that I'm getting that I could write to, but I wouldn't necessarily say there's been an increase of communication outside of that. We're just making a lot of art, but most of the art that we've made for a long time now is able to be created when it's in collaboration through things like email and phone. I would be in a very different position if the internet went down.
Yeah.
Way more, which is crazy to think about. That would actually have a more detrimental effect on a lot of us, I think. But certainly in terms of what I could do creatively, that would be potentially dangerous. I'd have to very quickly figure out ways to, when I needed to, show the art. Because if you start sitting on that art for too long, it plasticizes. You know, it's really important that you paint over it, or just get it moving. So how about, may I say that same question, but lob it back at you, the same thing you just asked me?
It's actually has been beneficial for me in terms of communicating with the artists I left behind in Eugene when I moved over here. And so I'm no longer there every Thursday afternoon painting with them. But now they can't be getting together. And so we've been having a weekly Zoom meeting. And then off of that, we're showing each other art. We're all visual artists. And then there's been more emailing of the art. You know, okay, I showed it to you like that, but now I'll also email it. And so there's been a lot of feedback in that respect.
Is that changing the art that you're making? Or what effect is that having on the art that you're making?
I don't know that it's changing the art that I'm making, because I had already made a decision to be on a 10-month self-curriculum to take my ability to paint and watercolor and art, any form of my visual arts. I've created I'm in the process. I've got the first few months of a curriculum for myself. And so quarantine, I have a fabulous studio, big. It's about 4 times the size of what I had in Eugene, and it's all in one space. So it's been fine for me. And my family's all healthy. So.
Right.
What about you? How old are your kids?
My kiddos are 11, 8, and 7.
So you're also doing homeschooling.
That's right.
How's that going?
You can't, it's inappropriate to drink whiskey at 9 a.m. I'll tell you, that's how it's going. It is a total shift. It is a total shift it has been really wonderful to be this involved. Whereas before, I could kind of, just like I could touch base and check in and do what I had to do. But I went from being, I don't know, like a C average dad in terms of like engaged with my kids' school stuff to being I'm just like much more locked in to their progress, my relationship with them in terms of teaching. Like I'm in schools all the time. I have endless patience for some kid who wants to like say mean things and like put their hands on me, but with my own kids, it's completely different. But the standards are completely different. I thought for some reason that would translate over, even though I knew it wouldn't, but that hasn't. So I've had to relearn patience with them, and then coming to meet them where they're at. And then also there's just the humiliation of they're all younger than me and they're all doing things that I've done at one point in my, public school career or whatever. And then like getting things wrong. So like my daughter almost submitted this thing and would have gotten like an A on it. And then I went back in and I corrected it and she got an F. She got an F because I helped. And so then I had to yeah, right. So then I had she could retake the assignment, but then there's like so many components that are really healthy there where like, not that they didn't know that I wasn't human and couldn't make mistakes, but my daughter knows more than me. The communication that she has with the teacher that she's talking to online is invaluable. She's in a position where she can teach me something. Like those things are pretty healthy. Screen fatigue stuff, that's real. That's its own monster. Your kids are like, again, to use some sort of drinking thing, like hung over off of the screens after. But we're also seeing after hours and hours of being on them. But I'm also seeing my wife has stepped up magnificently also too. It's not like I'm just by any means, but being able to get done, like maybe start at 9 and get done by noon and then have the rest of the day to get your yayas out. I'm like, well, why isn't school like this all the time? Like they should go work a field.
Yeah.
Go have them dig up rutabaga or something. I don't know. So, but that's been I think it's been really difficult. I think it's been really challenging to adjust to. And as we're adjusting, it's just becoming normal, so that's okay. But it's, I feel for all the parents, I feel for the kids, and I feel for the teachers who have to also do IT. Yeah. They're also having to answer. They must be getting the worst emails, like the best also, but also just because everybody has the freedom right now to be totally out of sorts, and you can't tell somebody your behavior emotionally is out of line. Like right now, you can kind of act however, like you need to be civil, you need to pay attention to the laws, but like as far as being like polite, you throw that out the window, So it's been cool to see that stuff remain, I think, in all honesty, like that kind of courtesy exists when it doesn't have to. Yeah. Let me rant on that for a second, geez.
Well, that brought me to a question. It looks like we have one similar to that, like having class with your kids. Do you have, does that class take place in your studio? Like, are you in the studio creating with your kids and teaching them while creating and things like that? I'm sure that happens naturally anyway, but is this kind of forced into that right now?
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of freedom that way, oftentimes to work with my stuff or on my stuff, but I'm not coming into a school where I'm like some new face. They know all my tricks, they know everything, and they are very much interested in the things that they're creating. So there's a lot of submitting that has to happen, a lot of humility that has to happen if I'm going to work with them in a healthy way. Like I have to bow to them a lot of the time, and then I have to kind of rise in ranks, and then we can see each other as peers. But when it comes to making art, if some of the tenets of that, some of the fundamental components of that are like being honest and being expressive, well, you can do that at any age, and you can create amazing art at any age. So I don't have some like higher ranking position. So a lot of times I meet like a peer when we're doing any kind of art creation. it has been, and like my daughter's just an amazing, like she's a great writer. And then because I really like her writing, I'm saying. And then because she likes her writing, she only will, like, I'll say, oh, you should try this idea. And sometimes she's open to it, but other times she's just like, I know you think you do that, but you know, like you need to step out of my room for a second. When the novella is done, I will let you know. So I think it's tricky. I think it's tricky to do the thing and engage your kids, but I think they've just sort of been steeped in it. So that's what I'm most grateful for. It's just like around all the time. So that's what's kind of cool about it.
Awesome. I like that idea of, and I had mentioned it when we talked about in the Infinite Moment exhibit, the truck that was created in there by another artist. And he has a 5-year-old son that was just a part of the process the entire time. And like hearing his, he can have some tough critiques, you know, children can have some really tough critiques. And it brings you to a peer level very quickly when you're like, oh yeah, they called me on that one.
Okay, because you care about what they say. It's not some stranger. Yeah. You know, like you want your kids' approval. Do you like this? Eh. Like my daughter and my wife were gonna do like a TikTok dance, right? And they were like, at one point they were like, maybe we'll use one of your songs, and then they were like, nah, that's not a good idea. You know, that hurt. I was like, yeah, you go with the new song, dang, like, you know. So, but that's so good. That's really good. I don't know, if you don't like humiliation, nobody really likes humiliation, but if you can't sort of be familiar with it, then yeah, art is gonna be harder. It's gonna be harder to make. Somebody said, I am so grateful for BIS, the teachers rock. I second and third and fourth that. That's been a pretty amazing experience. Yeah. Oh, there's been some other fun, this question, has the pandemic resulted in any creative epiphanies outside of just the art that I'm making? Yeah, we got to just grab junk. We grabbed a whole bunch of just like pallets and stuff, and I made like a big house in the backyard, like out of pallets, and that was fun, like just getting to do that with the kiddos, and that was super cool. There was a question a little bit ago about folks writing on Facebook that I wanted to better understand, and Instagram and stuff, because there has been a lot more writing lately. I'm just going to read it. It says, people are writing a lot through Facebook posts and Instagram and emails, etc., even if they have never written much before. How could we somehow access this collective body of work and create some sort of collage? That's a great art idea. That's pretty good. That's like some data analysis and understanding our journeys through this time as a species on this marble in space. Yeah. In that vein, is it important to create a space to commemorate this time some way in a museum? And yeah. If art is chronicling us and we are used to putting this in, yeah, that's a great point. Because the work of that would be sifting through some of that. I mean, that's a great question. Yeah.
I
see a hand.
We've got a hand raised over here, and I know where it's.
Oh, we have an answer.
Hi, and Dana put it in the chat as well, but one of the things that was a great question about museums and collecting stories, and the High Desert Museum is collecting those stories right now and would love any submissions by people with their art or photos of objects that we should pass this collect, or stories. And so that's on our website, and we're definitely thinking about, this is an important time that's affecting the world, and that's the goal of, some of the goals of museums are to keep those stories and objects in our collection so we can tell and teach the future generations about those. So that's definitely there, and I can put a link in the chat of where you can submit those. We'd love to see them.
Yeah.
And as a wife of a BIS teacher, thank you. He was trying to come in. My husband was coming to say hi, but then he felt a little awkward.
Oh, yeah. That's how I feel. That's how I feel, because they'll be in a meeting and I'll just walk past the room like in a towel and be like, "Are you talking to the whole school right now?" Yeah. I'm hoping that the places that are established right now, so I say this to High Desert Museum, I say this to anybody, places that are established right now look at how they can expand into the future and what it means to be relevant is the wrong word, but kind of like relevant. Useful is not quite the right word either, but kind of like that. And then I'm also hoping that because of this particular scenario, that folks realize what they can do doesn't have to be on such a level. Like High Desert Museum that's a big place. That'd be a big undertaking for an individual or a collection of people to just start up. You know, that takes a lot. But I would love to see collections or collectives start to emerge and sort of pop up to help better inform where creative energy is happening in this community. Like we see it on Facebook. We're used to putting it on Facebook. We're used to putting it on Twitter. It would be great to see that be a little bit more hyper localized and a little more centralized and speak to the community, because there are like neighbors who are getting together who know that everybody's like cool to be around each other, and there has to statistically be some neighbors that get together who are also like have got some sort of writers group or some kind of that would be great. And to know that that doesn't have to be some hard like some fully established thing to have relevance. I'm really curious about that, because it must be happening. Like this is the best time to write your book. Like this is the best time. You know, I mean, there's like everything. It's just like, it's like bowling with, I'm not saying the book's going to be any good. The time it takes to write a good book is the same time it takes to write a bad book. But you have this, it's like bowling with the bumpers. Like you have this very clear channel. And it's not about writing a good book or the bad book. It's just about the exercise of writing the book, which is so hard. This is the time. It must be folks. I see Trudy, for example. She's over there. Wonder if she's got a book. Not that you have to do it. It doesn't matter. Just wondering. Oh my goodness. I would also like to see, I know there must be stuff that isn't popping up on Facebook, what have you, because we just fatigue. We just are so sick of emails and all that after a certain point, especially not like we thought. There was a moment where we thought that we weren't going to get them. And then like that week, 1 week turned from like no emails, not really. And then just, they all came in like double force. And some folks must have retreated far away from the technology. And that's also a place of creativity almost always when you retreat.
And there's a great comment on here. For me, fear of losing people has been a catalyst for capturing their stories, which is kind of circled back to a bit of what we started with. You're saying like when faced with, you know, maybe confronting your own mortality a little more, people have a bit more of a desire to, well, figure out what this is all about and start creating things and, you know, going on those journeys. And it just, yeah, people have to be stockpiling and producing and really going through, not only, you know, going through their mental space and asking really big questions that you wouldn't take the time to ask otherwise usually.
Yeah. Yeah. You made me think of that. I'm not a fan or a foe of Steve Jobs or whatever, but that revelation that he had, like, it's just people, like anybody can, like, in his case, help to design a computer or what have you, or a culture. But it's just people who realize that they could figure it out, you know? When you're having these kind of deep emotional experiences, that gives you the credit, or that gives you the fuel to be creative. And also too, especially if you're not like established in the scene, you're like a vital creative force, because you're like something fresh that can help us all have other insights, because we get comfortable looking to the same people over and over again, and there's merit and value in that. But we need to see that, like, that sort of youthful voice, and not just from like younger folks. Like, we need to see that fresh youthful voice come out from, regardless of age, people that we haven't necessarily experienced before. And we're gonna all kind of in theory, all get to kind of emerge and see each other for reals again in this new way. So again, I'm hopeful, very hopeful for what's going to come from this. If you're having to confront every day the fear of losing somebody, for example.
And I think we're getting right up to the end of our program. This was the first one we've done like this. I know there is a survey to kind of capture everyone's thoughts, and we're going to try and keep doing things like this. We want to have conversations with artists in our community and with our community at the same time, and have that happen in real time. And right now this is maybe the best tool we have, but we will keep trying. So please come back and let's do it again, and let us know what you liked and what we can improve and all of that.
Prototypic.
And I want to thank and everyone who's ever got a mic on, I'm sure, wants to thank Jason for taking the time tonight to invite us into his studio and talk to us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's going to be my new greeting, jazz hands to everybody.
Yeah.
It's getting the water off after you wash them.
Like, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Stay
Thanks.
safe.
Thank you.
Eat good
You
food.
too.
You too.
Good.
And I don't know how it actually ends. That's the funny thing. Like,
People
it's
just-
digital.
People just leave. This is like how I do shows. I just don't stop. And I just wait for folks to be like, really have to go.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Good to see you, Trudy.
Yeah,
Hi, guys.
thanks for everything. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Good.
Still carrying on, do they not know
Good
how
to see
to?
you, Beth.